And now, Focus on the Pines with your host, Jack Barnes.
Hi, I'm Jack Barnes, and welcome to Focus on the Pines, where we bring you news, views, and interesting people from in and around Ocean Pines. It's not often that a newly elected director also becomes president of the board of directors, but we happen to have that very same individual here today, Tom Terry, newly elected president of the Ocean Pines Board of Directors. Tom, welcome to Focus on the Pines.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, before we get into maybe a little more nitty-gritty in Ocean Pines, maybe our viewers would like to know a little bit more about Terry and where he grew up. I understand you were from the great state of West Virginia.
Yes, I am. I grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia. Learned to work there. Started out my working career as actually working as a busboy in an Italian restaurant. So if I need a job, I may go over to De Novo's.
Hey, that works.
See if I could find work. But started out there when I was about 14 years old, and then I worked as an orderly in hospitals to pay for my college education, where I went to West Liberty University, which is just outside Wheeling.
Yeah, just so people know, it's kind of up in the Panhandle, I think, maybe about an hour from Pittsburgh.
It's about an hour from Pittsburgh.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, so I kind of know some of that area.
Right. So I lived there for 21 years before I moved off and started moving around the state working for the phone company.
And then I understand that was that time when you met your wife Carol in class somehow?
Carol sat right in front of me in speech class, and I got enamored with her, and still am.
Did you annoy her in speech class, or did you?
I did everything to get her attention I could do. 4.5 years later, she said yes, and we've been married over 35 years now. So.
Congratulations, that's great.
You.
She must have been quite a catch for you to pursue her like that. Huh?
She was.
Now, you went on from college and you got involved in the telecommunications industry?
Yes, I was hired into working for AT&T back before the big breakup.
Oh, God, yes, before all the breakup.
All that opportunity, yeah. And started out working with the construction crews, building the pole line, putting the cables in the ground, and just basically learning the company from the ground up.
That's a great way to learn it.
I agree.
And then you moved kind of through, what, AT&T and Bell Atlantic?
At the breakup, I stayed with what became Bell Atlantic, moved from the construction organization over to the public relations and regulatory side. And then the next step, they had a program where you could create your own company within the corporation and own it for a period of time, an entrepreneurial program.
At that point, you were in Columbia, Maryland?
No, we had not moved to Columbia.
Not moved there yet.
We were in Charleston, West Virginia at that point.
Okay.
And when we created the company, that's when we moved to Columbia and started running that for the next period of time.
That's quite an accomplishment, starting a company up like that, even if it's in another large corporation.
It was an interesting experience to be in the larger corporate world, but also be in the think tank, kind of creating your own company out of the garage approach. We were very successful. We did quite a bit of business for the company and did well ourselves.
And, of course, you're in Columbia, which is the HOA, I guess, as far as HOAs go, size-wise. So you had a little experience with HOAs there. And were you involved at that point?
No, actually, I was very deeply involved in my career at that point when I lived in Columbia for 20 years. So I was very involved in the communities back in West Virginia and the various communities I lived in. Chambers of Commerce, State Chamber, those kinds of things. When I got over to Columbia, my career kind of took over for a few years as I moved up the ranks, and then ultimately in 2006 retired and started our own company. And
now your wife Carol also was very successful in her career path, a little different area.
Yes, she was trained as a medical technologist, the equivalent of a CPA. And being a medical technologist, started out working the lab tests at the bench, ultimately became a lab manager. She then went on to design labs for hospitals, became a director of labs for an outpatient clinic for a medical school, moved over to Columbia, went to work for what became Quest Diagnostics on the customer relations side. So she's got a very long and 30 years in medical career at this point. She's now helping us work with Terry and Unitas in our company.
Tell our viewers that a little bit, because that company, you're involved with Unitas, and there is a connection with the famous Johnny Unitas. It's
Yes.
through the grandfathers?
Through the grandfathers. The grandfathers were brothers.
And that's the company, if you could explain it, that you offered Ocean Pines. You did some pro bono work for Ocean Pines. And what was it? What was the company did?
Well, we started out to look at building a marketing plan for Ocean Pines and started to put that together, and it became obvious to us immediately that we needed to sit down with each department head, walk through all the products and services, the pricing matrix. We had to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what does Ocean Pines have? What are the products? What are the pricing models? How do they work? Are the demographics changing for the community? So as part of putting together, in a marketing plan, you can start with a base product set, but what we found in Ocean Pines was that we needed to help define that a little better than what was here. So that's ultimately what we've, in fact, Bob Thompson will be the recipient of that report that we've just pulled together.
Now, you mentioned, Tom, that you've been full-time resident since 2006.
Yes.
How'd you end up in Ocean Pines?
When we first moved to Columbia, we met a couple in church whose mother lived down here, and they invited us to spend a weekend down here, and for the next 20-plus years, we were down here visiting with them 2, 3, 4 times a year, and we're literally out walking their son's dog one day, and the dog sat down in the middle of the street and looked at a lot. I'm assuming there was a rabbit or something running around, and all of a sudden, Carol noticed that there was a little sign that says it was for sale.
How about that?
So we came back and said, well, we really had a choice to make, because we had spent a week at Hilton Head Island every year in a timeshare. And we sat back and said, where do we really want to end up? Because the impending retirement from Verizon was happening. Could we buy the land and then ultimately build later? At some point, I was going to retire. We made the decision between the two. This has a community. We didn't view Hilton Head as having a sense of community. We saw a community here, and that's really the reason we moved here.
One of the reasons we ended up here too. Yeah,
you blame it on the dog.
I'm well known for dogs, as you may know, but that's the first one I've seen as a service dog that selects lots.
Selects lots, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you ended up down here. You got involved. You're in Budget and Finance Committee.
Yes.
But what on earth gave you the predisposition to say, I want to run for the Ocean Pines Board of Directors?
Actually, I had a group of people at various times come to me and say, we'd like you to run. My first answer was, well, we'll see, the polite answer. The more I talked to them, the more they convinced me that I could be helpful. So I said, okay, we'll put the name on the ballot, and we'll see if we can win. I mean, it's my first time ever running for public.
Is that right?
Quote, public office was down here. I'd never done that before. It was a whole different experience.
I bet it was.
But that's how it happened. Various people came together and said, we think you could be positive.
Well, that says a lot, that people thought well enough of you to encourage you to run, and possibly between that and the fact that you obviously were involved and were willing to give some pro bono work out of your company in Ocean Pines, it says a lot, and maybe that's why your peers said, I think this guy can be president in his first year, because you're not just stepping in blind. You knew what was going on. Particularly the budget and finance people really have a good handle on things.
Well, that could, obviously I had the advantage of having worked on the marketing and the product assessment and meeting with all the department heads and working through that with my company. But as I've told people, I ran for the board. I didn't run for the presidency. That was not something that I sought at all. It was, obviously I ended up in the chair, and I'm happy to be there. But it's not standard for someone to get elected to a board and then immediately become the president of it.
And it seems like Ocean Pines this year, we're going through some non-standard situations. We have Bob Thompson, GM, who is probably the first local, and the guy with the business background, as opposed to coming out of, let's say, the municipal world.
Right.
You've had, maybe not a little unfair, you've had just a little time working with Bob. Do you find any transitional type challenges, or what do you view as the biggest challenges at this point, Tom?
Well, I think that what Ocean Pines has faced, there's ongoing decisions that need to be made. The yacht club is obviously the first one.
The whole outsourcing
issue, the whole yacht club issue, the building itself. Those things were going on. You know, when I came in to be on the board, they were a carryover from before. Ultimately, we've got to make some long-term decisions of what is right for this community. Outsourcing was one of them. That was, you know, obviously that was not a 90-10 decision, as I've said before. That was a 51-49 opportunity. I saw Bob coming in, as you asked me what it's like to work with Bob at this point. He's extremely energetic. He's got some passion about what direction he wants to go. It was obvious to me at least that, you know, the answer to the outsourcing at this point was this was his vision of where he thinks we need to go. And I think we need to support, you know, a brand new general manager who has a vision of what he wants to do. Outsourcing is always an option out there. It's not gone. You can always fall back to that if that's the right answer. So it's not that we have, that in my mind anyway, that I haven't closed the door on outsourcing as a possible solution to issues, but there is a direction that Bob wanted to go that I felt, you know, again, I'm one vote. I'm not seven votes. I'm one guy. I view the president's role as being one to coordinate and make sure everyone has a chance to have their voice heard. You know, I'm one vote at the end. I'm one vote, and obviously you have the opportunity to set some direction from that position. But in the end, I view my role as making sure everybody gets a voice and gets to put their facts and figures and their viewpoint forward so that we have an open discussion. Now, when you have open discussion, that leads to different factions having different positions on what ought to be done. But that comes with the nature of the business. When you're going to have open discussion, you're going to have open disagreement.
Sure. Right. I asked Bob Thompson this to give our viewers just an update. We're currently, relative to outsourcing,
yes,
there are some decisions made. Could you tell us where we stand, what you're able to tell us?
There have been two board motions that have been passed. The first board motion was that we have selected Casper as being the company that we would work with if we outsourced. Then the next motion, which was passed at the last meeting, was that Bob and I were directed by the board to go negotiate with Casper, in essence, to take over the management of the country club facilities, which is all the golf course, turn, grill, and the upstairs at the country club.
Okay.
And we're now currently in negotiations with Casper, working through contract language at this point.
Another issues that come up outside of that oftentimes are the whole issue of appearances of property in Ocean Pines. And of course, from a budget and finance standpoint, this situation with the economy we're in, people maybe not paying their assessments. Can you give us some view on those two issues?
The CPI issue, to me, comes down to...
That's the appearance issue.
That's the appearance
compliance
issue.
and permits inspections department.
There are rules and regulations that have been passed by previous boards, previous organizations within the Pines that need to be implemented and need to be enforced. And I believe Bob is going to do that. I think they've been doing that. Do some of them need to be reviewed and assessed? I think there are a couple issues that need to be defined better. The whole boat trailer versus other trailer issue.
Oh, that's a perennial one.
It needs to have some assessment so that we can provide the board, the general manager, a direction of what rules we believe, representing the citizens, what they want. We represent the people, in putting forth those rules and regulations that the majority of the people want us to have in our community here, that we believe they want. So we've got to finalize that and keep enforcing those rules. As far as the collections and the foreclosures, I think there is a responsibility on the part of any HOA to have collection procedures and to follow them. And that's what they're doing. The economies go from very good to very bad, and it's not that I'm cold-hearted, because I'm not, but you have to if you start giving passes for people, then the rules are being violated. And in my opinion, you've got to put the rules forth. If they're working, you keep going with them. If they need to be tweaked or adjusted, fine. But Ocean Pines, just like any HOA, needs to move forward and collect the dues that are due them. The government has some new regulations and some new costs on foreclosures that they have changed, so it's made it a little more expensive to do that. So we have to make some management reasonable sense. In any rule or regulation, there's guidelines that have to be followed, but at some point you have to step back and say, what is the next step that needs to be followed? At some point, management has to manage and make decisions within the confines of a direction. And I think it's our job to provide the direction, and then it's the management's job to decide within these boundaries from A to B what should be done. There are examples of situations, where you have to listen to people and work through it. I think that, to me, it comes down to communicating. If you're in a situation where you're behind on dues, come in and sit down with Bob Thompson and talk through your situation. That's the beginning of the solution, in my mind. Sitting out and not communicating, not responding to the letters that are going out is not the answer. The answer is coming in, sit down, and let's talk through your situation and what can be done.
I wanted to ask also, and maybe this is too vague, but there's always been this difficulty maintaining sort of a balance between, we have our amenities and trying to make sure our amenities are kept up to date, which wasn't done for quite a number of years, or expanding on them, and then having assessments that, and as a budget and finance guy, not necessarily dipping into reserves, which is always gets a little bit of a debate in Ocean Pines, but having assessment increases, because we probably won't ever see decreases, that are reasonable for this balance for people to handle in Ocean Pines. And that question may not sound like a question, but do you kind of get where I'm coming from?
Sure. I think coming from my background in what my company does now, we do economic development for communities across the country. We also do marketing and promotional studies, those kinds of things. The first thing I do when I look at Ocean Pines is I look at it holistically. Look at all the amenities that are there, the various pools, the golf courses, the beach parking, the beach access, the clubs, the yacht club, the community center, the very activities, the organizations that are here. In whole, you end up with a very vibrant, alive community that has a set of amenities that have been established for this community. It makes Ocean Pines different than a lot of other communities around the country. There are very few communities, by the way, across the country that have the broad breadth of amenities that we have. Well, in that amount of amenities, you end up with smaller groups of people each using the amenity they like to use. I don't play tennis, but a lot of people do. If you've ever seen me play golf, you know I don't play golf, but I do hit the ball.
You must play like I play.
I hit the ball. There are people who like to surf, or there are other people who like to play cards. There's various things that go on. So each group has their own interest. As a whole, I think we have to look at Ocean Pines as having amenities. At one point there was a horse farm.
Yes, I remember that.
That was available here. So it's not that things don't evolve. They do over time. A few years ago, we didn't have a skate park in Ocean Pines. We do now, one of the very successful amenities. So I think you're getting to the point of, well, does it have to make money or not? At what point do you pull the trigger on something? It's my personal belief, it's just my own belief, that amenities have, if they can make a dollar and make a profit, that's fine. I think that's great. If they can come within a reasonable distance of making a profit, maybe there's a little bit of subsidization that comes from the community, but I subsidize the community center as well in my dues. So there's amenities out there that are being supported by this. When you get to a possible revenue generating amenity, Those are the amenities that find themselves in the crosshairs of those who want to think of them as being a business versus an amenity. At some point, amenities do become too expensive for the group to say, I want to keep this. It's just not working. It's not worth it. But from my background of running products for Verizon and Bell Atlantic, you don't remove core products from your product set without really thinking about it and really assessing it. You know, you don't yank away a yacht club out of the middle of the community and say, well, it lost a lot of money 5 years ago and again and again and again. We need to get rid of it. You take that amenity and realize it's one of the cores. If you go back to when Ocean Pines was first created, the vision that was behind putting this together was having all of these amenities there. Now, the community around Ocean Pines now is dramatically different than it was then. So that doesn't mean you don't assess what you do with an amenity. But at the same time, you don't yank away core anchor amenities from a community without really thinking about what the impact is on that community and it was there for a reason. So yeah, I think there's a pain point, quite frankly, using that phrase, where an amenity can require some subsidy to have it available to make sure it's there. Huge subsidies year after year after year, obviously that's an issue that needs to be addressed by a board. And then you have to say, well, you know, is this working or not? Do we still need it? Understand, we have, at the beginning of Ocean Pines, it was build out, get people to buy lots, build homes. Most of it is built out now. There's a lot of people sitting in Ocean Pines who own homes. And, you know, Ocean Pines can't own the real estate price market. I can't drive that, whether it's up or down. What we can do in Ocean Pines is make our homes more marketable than possibly somewhere else. If we start yanking away amenities, which created the image of Ocean Pines in the first place, which is why we moved here, we start moving those away, I can't control the price in the marketplace, but without question, those amenities make this area different and more marketable if you're trying to sell your house. I can't promise you're going to sell your house. I can't do that. But I can say that these amenities certainly make our homes more marketable within the market in which they're functioning.
Do you find the fact that over half of our property owners are non-residents somewhat of a challenge?
Well, clearly in a HOA, we have 50% of our folks not living here full time. Their interest level is possibly different. It's a weekend place, it's a vacation place, maybe they rent it out, it's an investment. Your relationship to the HOA is different. In my mind, what I've seen the trend is that more and more and more people are living here full time. So that, you know, we've now reached the level where half the people are here full time, regardless of the Florida exodus for a period of time. The full-time resident number is growing and growing and growing. And keep in mind, those houses that are rented to someone, those are full-time residents that are living here. So the idea of Ocean Pines still being the weekend place for people to come to just for a short period of time is evolving. We're getting more and more full-time people here all the time, which is why I think the marketplace here is changing dramatically over time.
Interesting. Well, you know, I certainly appreciate your openness. Is there anything I might have missed or anything you'd like to share with the viewers as we end up here?
Well, I just want the folks to understand that I am committed to openness. I will open the door for information to be provided, for views to be heard, not promising to agree or disagree with anyone. But I think our role on the board is to make sure we're listening, we're paying attention, that we keep the doors open, and that at some point we have to make decisions that are not easy. But we will make the decisions and move Ocean Pines forward. Thanks for having me.
Well, we will certainly thank you for taking the time and sharing some of your thoughts and views, and wish you well in what's going to be some challenging decisions in times ahead, but sounds like you're up to the challenge, and you got a new, as you say, GM with a lot of enthusiasm and a good background, and you may get a decent group of people on the board. So as a representative of the property owner, we have high expectations for you. And while we do wish you well, we'll be looking over your shoulders, as you know. It's Ocean Pines.
I expect that.
Thank you again. Tom Terry, President of the Ocean Pines Board of Directors. This is Jack Barnes for Focus on the Pines.